If you saw a habitat called In with the Raptors, I'm pretty sure you'd be on it like a pigeon on a chip, and that is exactly what we're going to be building today. Let's go. Today we're going to be building a high security complex of habitats for 3 different species of raptor, which the guest will be able to go inside via the viewing domes. And if we want it to be heavy security, we've got some research to do. We need to research the heavy fences in order to get the industrial high security look that I want for this habitat. And with the fences researched, we can start building. So which 3 species of raptor are our guests going to be going in with? That is an interesting one. What I decided is I wanted only the realistic raptors in this habitat. So we have 6 raptor species in the game, and according to the latest scientific knowledge, as far as we know, all raptors were feathered. So for that reason, we will only be looking at the raptors in the game that have feathers. Now, we all know that the velociraptors in the film were nothing like they were in real life. Michael Crichton liked Deinonychus, but he preferred the name velociraptor, so he just merged the 2 together. So in the first habitat, we're going to have Deinonychus, and I'm going to have their color scheme as close as possible to the Jurassic Park raptors, as a bit of a callback to those. In the second habitat, we're going to have Ostroraptor, which has got a pretty realistic model from what I can tell, and being fish eaters, they're quite unique. I considered Pyroraptor, but they're only about half the size in real life that they are in the game, and with a Trosiraptor not having any feathers in the game, I didn't want to have those. And that leaves us with the final habitat, and we're going to have Utahraptor. They are, quite frankly, terrifying, and being in a little viewing dome inside their habitat will be quite an experience. Alright, that's the animals decided, so how's the habitat going to work? As you can see, we've got a network of waterfalls cascading water from the top 2 habitats down to the bottom habitat, and that's important because all of the raptors lived in fairly wet areas, swamps, floodplains, places like that, so we want quite a bit of water in the habitats, especially for the Ostroraptor. Now IRL, the guests would go into the entrance, which is going to be at the bottom of the screen here, and then they would progress through tunnels into viewing domes for the Deinonychus, then Ostroraptor, and then finally the climax of Utahraptor. There's no way to do that exactly in the game. What we can do is have one entrance at the front, which is going to have all 3 of the remote viewing dome entrances inside it, and then the guests will go into the entrance and then appear in the various viewing domes depending on which hidden entrance they choose. The entrance building is going to be the last thing that we create today, but it is going to be heavily inspired by the Raptor pen in Jurassic Park, but much bigger and much more imposing. Lots to do before that though. We'll connect each viewing dome to one of the remote entrances, and that's the logistics of the guest side of the habitat done. Now we're going to get those heavy fences in and start creating dividers between all the habitats and a big security wall around the outside. Most of these walls will be hidden by foliage, but what I want is where the walls are just kind of peeking through a little bit, I want the impression that these are some seriously high security walls, because that's going to make it a more intense experience. So we're going to leave gaps in the fence where all the water is running, because we're going to make some culverts, I think they're called, which would allow the water to run through it, prevent the dinosaurs from getting into it. And then finally, we'll add the gates in for our staff. And there we go. That's the basics of the habitat done. Time to make it look good. The first thing to do is get the waterfalls that end in the Deinonychus habitat looking good. So what we're going to do is firstly use the terrain tool, mainly the rocky terrain, which adds these nice little rocks as well as the rock texture. So we're going to cover up the sides of the waterfall and where the water flows with that, and just keep experimenting with that and the barren wilds and the boulder strewn landscape until we get this looking as good as we can do without actually placing any rocks ourselves. Now we'll extend that right up into the Ostroraptor and the Utahraptor habitats, and once we've got it looking as good as we can with the terrain tool, we will add these separate rocks. And now it's looking good, let's move on. In the Ostroraptor habitat, they want a lot of wetlands, so we're going to add quite a lot of that in here, and then we're going to use other brushes to remove most of the trees, because I don't want a kind of cypress swamp in here. I want some more realistic trees for the Pacific Northwest. But by doing this, we get all the kind of marshy wetland coverage that we need, whilst still being able to make the habitat look the way that we want it to, rather than the way that the game wants it to. We'll use our usual conifer forest to start covering up most of those security walls. We'll run that around the outside of the habitat as well, just so it's not kind of an eyesore in the park. And then we'll put little patches of forest here and there inside the habitat for interest and to give the Ostroraptors places to go where they're not directly in sight of the viewing dome. Once we've done that, we'll put in a fish feeder for them, and we'll customize that just with some very simple wooden logs and some metal stands. just to get away from the kind of high-tech look, make it sit in a bit nicer with the forest that surrounds it. I do this all the time, so probably worth mentioning again to make sure you turn collision off when you're doing stuff like this, or the dinosaurs won't be able to get to their food. Again, super simple, it's just 2 pieces, but it just makes it look a little bit nicer. And once we finish that off, I want to put some scenery in as well. I really like some of the blueprints that you get with the wetlands pack, and they fit this wetland environment really nicely. So we're just going to drop in a few of Frontier's blueprints, customize them slightly so it looks like we've got a bit of shelter for our Ostroraptors here. And then we'll go in with some final detailing, drop some dead trees and some rocks and things like that throughout the habitat. A bit more terrain painting to make the more used areas seem more used. And there we go, that's the Ostroraptor habitat looking nice. Let's move on to Deinonychus. These feisty little guys lived in floodplains and swamps with extensive tropical and pine forest cover. So we're going to use a mix of palm trees and some of our pine forest to complete this habitat, and just add a few more patches of wetland in there for them as well. Love the terrain brushes in this game, they look so good. I'm also going to drop in some of the carnivore climbing feeders that we built for Guanlong, because apparently Deinonychus may well have been good at climbing as well. And there we go, that's Deinonychus done and looking good. Let's move on to the final habitat for Utahraptor. These absolute beasts lived in less wet environments than the other raptors, from what I can tell. So we're going to add a little bit of wetland in and around that water there, and quite a lot of arid terrain. And then the rest of our pine forest, we'll place a few trees and logs in individually to make sure we get the sight lines that we want from the viewing gallery. Drop in a feeder right in front of the viewing gallery and cover it up with rocks as usual. And there we go, that's Utahraptor. Let's move on to the culverts, which is the last thing that we need to build inside the habitats. I was looking through the fence pieces to see if we had anything appropriate for this. I came across this gate for the petting zoo, which actually works really nicely. If we place this at the top at the gaps in the fences where the water comes through, and then we take one of the lamppost pieces, spin it upside down, we'll attach some other pieces to it so we can space it out correctly, and then we're just going to copy this upside down lamppost across the bottom of the gate. And once we delete the spaces, we'll have some perfectly spaced metal bars, and there we go, something the dinosaurs can't get through that the water can, and we can move on to the building. This is the Raptor pen that I built back in early access, and it's going to be a big influence on this build. I want to kind of use that vibe throughout it, and we're also going to have the actual Raptor pen sat next to the entrance for the guests to see as they walk in. But let's get on to doing the actual building. So we're going to create a big, long, industrial looking set of walls, which are going to form the front and the sides of the entrance to this exhibit, and the remote viewing dome entrance galleries will sit inside it. So we're going to use various different concrete pieces and some trims to get something that looks like the original Raptor pen and like the high security fences that you can see behind it. And we're going to create a larger version of the electric fence from the original Raptor pen to come out of the top of it. Basically want this to look scary. We want it to look serious. We want it to look like there are some serious dinosaurs behind here, and we need a lot of security. Electric overhangs like this should face into the habitat, not out of it, but it looks really cool, so I thought we'd do that as well. And once we've created one kind of slice of wall that we're happy with, we'll get some lights on it as well. Then we can use that to create the front of this entrance building and the sides. If you're enjoying this video, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you can see the rest of the series. The focal point of this area is going to be a big In With The Raptors sign and some nice rock work and planting, and I want this building to sit behind it and just look really imposing and bring to mind the original Raptor pen, get people in the mood for the Raptor experience. Alright, that wall's starting to come together, let's get it finished off. So we're going to take that one piece that we've built, move it to the front where we want it, and then we're going to copy it over here and create a variant of it. So we're going to get rid of that floodlight on the top, extend the electric fences over to the middle, and copy the light along with it. And now we can use this piece to finish off the wall. So we'll just keep copying this down the front of the path here till we get to the end, and then we can use another variant of that piece to create the side. And that's the walls of the building done, and we'll move on to the roof. So we're just going to take a simple piece of asphalt, we're going to tilt it slightly so that it would have some drainage, and copy that up to the back of the building. And once we've got to the back, we'll just copy that one piece along so that we can fill in the whole of the roof. And then we will add some of the towers from the original Raptor pen onto the roof as well, just to further bring that to mind. And there we go, that is the basics of this building done. Obviously it needs detailing and a door, etc., but we'll get to that. So what we're going to do now is create the sign. So I don't normally show creating the signs in this map, but I get quite a lot of comments about how I actually place the letters. So I thought I'd show you. The way to do them like this is once you've got one letter and you've got it roughly where you want it to go, instead of placing it down or hitting the R key to get to the advanced move tool, if you hit the X key, it will bring up the advanced move tool without getting rid of the menu. And that means once you've placed it down, you can carry on selecting the other letters and just really easily place all the letters down that you need to create the title without having to constantly reopen the menu and resize them and things like that. So once we've got it looking good, I've got the Raptors in the slightly more fancy of the in-game fonts and in with the in one of the other more normal fonts. What we're going to do is we've placed it so we've got this big R in the word Raptor, and then the other words are in a slightly smaller font. That looks really nice, but we're going to extend the bottom of that R. We're just using two letter I's placed on top of each other to create kind of an underline across the whole of the logo, just to make it look more like proper typography rather than just a load of text. And once we're happy with the way that that looks, what we're going to do is create a big piece of rock work that this text is going to go onto in front of the building. I think the most iconic part of the Raptor's anatomy is the enormous toe claw. So we're going to build some rock work that brings that to mind, just by scaling and rotating some of the rocks until we get something that looks good. The claw itself is pretty much just one rock, which is where the scaling tool comes in so handy, and then we'll use a larger rock to create the base of it. And then we'll move our logo onto the front of the rock, get some palm trees behind it, and then we're going to copy the logo, increase the scale ever so slightly, change it to red and move it behind the original logo, give us a nice two-tone effect on it. We'll put a nice circle of path in front of the building, and then we're going to start planting all around the rock and on the rock as well, mainly using the scaevola bushes and some of the, I think the thistle bushes growing out of the little cracks in the rock. And finally, we're going to achieve something we've been trying to achieve since episode 1 of this series, which is to get something that looks like roots into the rocks. I tried it in the Hypsilophodon habitat, fairly happy with the results. Tried a different technique in the Dimorphodon habitat, but finally I think this scale of rock and this angle means we can use this dead tree to create something that really does look like big roots that are growing down through the rock. Really happy with how that looks. Gonna add just a few more bushes and upside down bushes onto it. And there we go. That looks really nice. All we need to do now is add a door onto the front of the building and a few final details and we'll be done. We'll use 2 of these doors that actually create the darkness behind them, put a glass panel above it, and then put a modified version of our sign into the glass, drop the actual Raptor pen next to the entrance, and then the last thing we're going to do is just a little bit of customizing on these viewing domes. I've got rid of the bars in front of them, which completely ruin the view, don't know why they're there. Recolored it to grey to match everything else, and that is in with the Raptors complete. Let's check it out. Expedition time. We've got 3 sets of Raptor DNA to go and grab, so we are going to go and grab them, and then we can start breeding them. We start with Deinonychus in their Jurassic Park Velociraptor inspired colours. I think it's the first time I've ever had them in a park. Then we move on to the Ostroraptor, which, given that they're fish eaters, I'm given the colour scheme of a heron, which I think is rather fetching. And then finally the enormous Utahraptor. What an absolute beast this is. Gone with the tiger-inspired coloration for them, and as they step into the sunlight, it's really striking. Let's see where they're going to live. I love all the foliage around here, the way it's kind of buried away amongst all the palm trees and the bushes, and the original Raptor pen looks really cool with this fence around it. And I think if I was a guest, I would be very excited to go in with the Raptors. That being said, let's get in there and take a look. Here's Deinonychus. This guy seems impressed with their traditional instant fight when they're put into the habitat. And here's the view of the Ostroraptors from the viewing gallery. One of them's caught a fish. I think the heron coloration works really nicely for these guys. I'm pretty pleased with that. It's a bit unusual, but let me know what you think of it in the comments. And we'll take a look at Utahraptor. You would not want to meet one of these down a dark alley. They're going to get through a lot of goats. What an amazing dinosaur. Definitely my favourite raptor now. And that is in with the Raptors. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that is one of my favorite builds in this series so far. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comments. Let's take a look at where we started today. In between the tropical house and the entrance, and this is where we are now. It's absolutely enormous. And that is a big step towards the completion of our Cretaceous area. Thank you so much for watching as always. I'll see you again next week for some more Jurassic World Evolution 3. Bye.